We're going to go all over the draft from top to bottom. Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com. He's got his final mock draft posted, and you can play along with us. The draft tonight, 8 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. We'll have it for you, every pick, including the Eagles at 25, should they stay there. And some interesting things. We, of course, will hit on the Eagles with Scott, but at the top of the draft tonight, Scott, you have Kyler Murray. A lot of people think Kyler Murray. I know they're trying to float at the last minute here that there could be a surprise or it's not a home run. But do all signs for you point to Kyler Murray getting his name called first?
I sure think so, if for no other reason than bridges have been burnt with Josh Rosen. I don't think that relationship can be healed. I made the analogy on Twitter that, try dating someone else for a few months, then go back to your significant other and say, I decided to stick with you after all. Find out how well that goes over. So if that's the main reason, but I will give kudos to Arizona and the NFL for creating this suspense and drama for a decision that many feel was made months ago.
Yeah, I know a lot of people kind of agree with you there, and if they, what's more likely, they draft someone else or they trade?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit of the first part. Who was it?
What's more likely, that they draft somebody different than Murray or they trade and somebody else takes Murray?
Oh, I got you. I think it's more likely that they take someone else because there are people in the organization that like Nick Bosa, that like Quinnen Williams. It's understandable. They're the consensus top two players in this draft in some order. It's a 1A, 1B situation. So I think that's more likely, but ultimately, if they decide they don't want Kyler Murray, I think John Gruden and the Raiders are sitting there at 4, and they have a stockpile of draft picks that I think they would make a deal, and Arizona could probably still get Bosa or Williams at 4. At least there's a good chance. So I think they probably would. I'll be surprised if they don't go Murray, put it that way. But if Murray doesn't go to the Cardinals, he's going to end up with the Raiders.
Scott Wright, Draft Countdown. Kyler Murray, number 1. All right, Nick Bosa. A lot of people think he's the best player in the draft. Very interesting. Didn't play, so it's been a while since we've seen him get a snap in a game. But you like him going at number 2.
I do. He's the total package. He brings every aspect of the game to the table, and especially his motor. It's just absolutely nonstop. So you hate to make that easy comparison to his brother Joey, but it's apt. And if anything, Nick, I think, is a little more athletic and explosive. So I think the Niners are going to be happy to get him there at number 2, and then after that, that's where the fun's going to start.
Yeah, let's look at the fun. Ed Oliver, you have going 3 to the Jets, and, a lot of people like Oliver at the last second here. He could be a guy that people try to trade into that spot for.
Yeah, possibly. And I mean, a lot of people are going to be surprised if they do that because Quinnen Williams is almost universally more highly regarded, but Greg Williams and the Jets reportedly have become infatuated with Ed Oliver. So if they stay there at number 3, I think that's the guy they're going to take. However, it's been one of the worst-kept secrets in the league for the past few months that they want to trade down. It's just a matter of getting the offer, and up until this point, nobody was willing to meet their demands. Now, maybe there's a suitor out there, specifically Washington. If they want to move up for Dwayne Haskins, the quarterback from Ohio State, maybe there's a deal to be made there, but that's going to be costly for Washington. You're talking maybe multiple first-round picks. So, but that's certainly the first pressure point of the draft, and what happens there is going to have a huge ripple effect throughout the rest of the top 10.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things is at number 4, where everybody thinks it's such a wild card, you've got maybe in your mock draft one of the biggest wild cards in T.J. Hawkinson, the tight end, going to number 4 to the Raiders.
Yeah, I kind of took my shot on that one, and I think it's possible. I've heard that Mike Mayock, their new general manager, loves T.J. Hawkinson, and it makes sense. They have a huge need at that position after losing Jared Cook. So, and if they don't take him at 4, he's not getting out of the top 10. He's going to go to Jacksonville 7, the Lions at 8, the Bills at 9. So he's one of the most universally loved prospects in this entire class. And I from what I heard, Ed Oliver, the defensive tackle from Houston, is their top choice. If he's gone, they might end up going Hawkinson.
They are a team that needs, or we think might want, not needs, a quarterback, right? I mean, Carr is not, thought to be the guy that they want there. So are they a wild card to maybe move up and try to get someone, or move back and try to get somebody? Do you think that they potentially will land a quarterback in that if they end up making a trade?
I will not be at all surprised if they come out of this draft with a quarterback. I don't know if it's going to be at number 4 overall, although they've been linked. I mentioned Murray, and they've also been linked to Haskins. I've heard at different points of the process that they like Drew Lock from Missouri, and if he starts to slide and he's there with one of those 2 late first-round picks, I think that could be a possibility. So, I would not be comfortable if I were Derek Carr. If for no other reason, then I don't even know if it's necessarily that John Gruden doesn't like Derek Carr. I don't think he likes Derek Carr's salary cap number and the restraints that puts on him. I think he'd be much more content to have a rookie quarterback at a fraction of the cost. So that's the big question the Raiders are going to have to ask themselves tonight, and I think we're going to have a much better feel for how they feel about Derek Carr after the first round tonight concludes. So the Raiders, I mean, obviously the 3 first-round picks, they're a team to watch, but if there is a team that's going to give us a surprise, it's them. And one more point on Hawkinson going number 4. A few days ago on Twitter, I kind of pondered what would be this year's equivalent of Denzel Ward going number 4 overall. And the conclusion I came to was Hawkinson. He's kind of the same range, the top guy at his position. So keep an eye on that. That's my big shot for my last mock draft.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Devin White, linebacker. Quinnen Williams, he's a lot of people, think that he might be one of the top couple players. You have him going to the Giants at number 6, which, we could zone in on the Giants here in NFC East land a little bit because, man, no quarterback last year, and now you think they're going to decide, nope, this isn't at least in this spot, isn't the year either.
Yeah, I've maintained for months that the Giants were going to take a defensive lineman with that top pick. That's just where the value is, and that's their MO as an organization. They have not changed their DNA in the 20-plus years I've been covering the draft, and probably for a decade or two before that. So they have a type, and they have a plan on draft day. And Quinnen Williams, that would be their dream scenario. And I don't know how likely that is, but all it will take is one unorthodox thing to happen in the top 5, and either Quinnen Williams or Josh Allen, the linebacker from Kentucky, will be there for the Giants. And I think that's the direction they're going to go. And then later on try to get Daniel Jones from Duke, who, again, for months I've maintained he fits their profile. He's what they look for in a quarterback. The problem is, will they get him at number 17? It's not a sure thing. So they might have to maneuver around a little bit to make sure they get him. But you know what? I wouldn't be at all shocked if the Giants came out of this first round with an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, and no quarterback.
Scott, at number 7, there's a guy down there that's an old friend of the Philadelphia Eagles named Nick Foles with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're in an interesting spot, a top 10 pick. What do you anticipate the Jaguars to do there? I mean, there's some whispers of going offensive line, and then there's also some talented linebackers, one particularly from Kentucky.
Yeah, and I haven't taken Josh Allen from Kentucky. He fell to them in my final mock draft. It's kind of a best player available scenario. I think the guy who would be the best fit for them if he was available is Hawkinson. If anybody's going to appreciate the kind of throwback at the position that Hawkinson is, it's Tom Coughlin. You hear Hawkinson get compared to Mark Bavaro, and Tom Coughlin's very familiar with that name. Another organization with a very old school approach and decision maker at the head. So that would be the best pick. Otherwise, like you said, offensive line. Then maybe they start that run on blockers, whether it's with Jonah Williams from Alabama or Jawan Taylor from Florida. I think would be the 2 most likely guys. So Jacksonville is a little bit of a wild card, but if Hawkinson's there, I think he's the favorite. Otherwise, offensive lineman, unless somebody like Josh Allen falls into their laps unexpectedly.
At number 8, we have the Detroit Lions, and how big of a draft is this for them? Top 10 pick. Here we are again with Detroit. Also, I'm thinking offensive lineman. I know you were leaning that way too, but where do you see them going with the number 8 overall pick tonight?
Yeah, they still need to shore up that offensive line, so I gave them Jonah Williams, the offensive tackle from Alabama, in the final mock draft. But of all the teams in the first round, if I were betting on one to trade down, this is the one, the Lions. They desperately want to dip out of that pick, and I think they'll be suitors, but probably not until they're on the clock. I think teams are going to want to see who's available. For example, if Hawkinson's available, the Patriots might be interested.
Right.
And granted, that would be really costly, but boy, what a perfect replacement for Gronkowski. If Ed Oliver is still available, I think the Atlanta Falcons might want to come up and get him. If Dwayne Haskins is available, maybe Washington wants to come up and get him. So I think we'll have to see which team, but I'm pretty confident the Lions are going to trade out of there. It's just a matter of how far down do they go.
Scott Wright's final mock draft from draftcountdown.com. Buffalo, Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle. There's so many guys that, it seems like their ceiling and their floor are, could be anywhere from, say, 4 to maybe into the 20s. Is he one of them?
Yeah, at one point I thought he might slide a little bit into the 20s, but as the draft got closer here, it sounds like he's going to go in the top half of round 1. And I've heard the Bills really like him, and he might not even be there for them. That's another player that the Falcons could be targeting at 14. That might be his floor. So the Christian Wilkins, he's got a lot going for him. I don't know if he's got the ceiling of, he's not, nobody's Aaron Donald, but I don't know if he's going to be that type of difference maker on the defensive line, but he's rock steady. He's got solid tape at defensive end, defensive tackle, 3-4, 4-3, and just earns raves for his intangibles. So, even though he might not have the highest upside, I think teams feel they know exactly what they're getting with him, and they like the package.
All right, Denver, obviously got Flacco, so they most likely won't be in the quarterback run here, but Devin Bush, linebacker, Michigan, which is interesting, because it depends on how long they think Flacco's there. It seems like they could possibly say, hey, we've got to develop a guy because they have missed on so many guys in the draft.
Yeah, and Broncos are going to bring in a quarterback at some point, but from what I'm hearing, it's not going to be at 10. I think the apple of their eye is one of those inside linebackers, either Devin White from LSU or Devin Bush from Michigan. I would bet big on one of those two being the pick if they're available. That's another situation where everybody knows the Broncos want them, so if you want them, you know where you got to get ahead of. So, but then I wouldn't be surprised if Drew Lock does start to fall. Maybe they trade back into the first round to secure his services. He's the guy that John Elway's been linked to. It makes a lot of sense, and there will be teams at the back end of round 1 that are open for business and ready to move down.
All right, that's your top 10 from Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com. Cincinnati, Brian Burns from Florida State. You've got going to them at number 11 as we go into the middle of the first round now. You look at number 12, and Andre Dillard, offensive line, Green Bay. Jawan Taylor, Miami at 13. Let's stop there because Miami seems to be a very interesting team in this draft. Obviously, a lot of people don't know what their plans are this year in terms of how competitive they want to be, but do they go quarterback? Do they just say, hey, you know what, we don't even like the quarterbacks in this draft, and we don't want one that's going to help us win much, so we'll just take another piece? Do you find at 13 Miami to be a very interesting team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I talked about the mock draft how they just really don't have a direction on either side of the ball, and they have to bring in a quarterback at some point, but I don't think they want to make such an investment that they're not back in the market next year if they need to be. So I think they'll invest maybe a day 2, maybe even a day 3 pick on a young signal caller, just so that they have an option. But I think in round 1 they're going to address the line, whether it's an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman. They just need to make sure they hit on the pick because the legitimate long-term building blocks there are few and far between. So, and I won't be surprised to see them move down. Maybe if that's a team, somebody wants to leapfrog to get a specific player, I think they're going to be open for business. And there's a lot of talk, are they tanking? Well, I think the way they handle this draft the next few days is going to give us a big indication. There's even some chatter that maybe they take Jeffrey Simmons, the defensive tackle from Mississippi State, who's going to miss half, if not all, of his rookie season. If they do that, the process, the 76ers-like process is full on. So I think we're going to get a better read on the Dolphins' plans, but I'll be surprised if they go quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, Montez Sweat, he's another interesting guy. Like, if you were doing your mock draft a couple of months ago, I think, in fact, it might have been yours, it had him going 25 to the Eagles. He jumped all the way up into, like, the top 10, and now he kind of seems to be sitting in the middle limbo here.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for uncertainty with him is at the Combine, he got red flagged for a heart issue, potentially. But now there's news today that some teams feel he was misdiagnosed. And even with the uncertainty, I still had him going 14 to the Falcons. I don't think he falls any further than, say, that or maybe the Carolina Panthers at 16. And if he's completely clear, I think he could be in the conversation as early as number 6 overall. just a freakish physical specimen and not just a workout warrior, a guy who's converted that talent into production on the field consistently over multiple years. So Montez Sweat, he's a little bit of a wild card, but it sounds like the medical is not going to be as big of a factor for him as it is maybe a guy like Rashawn Gary from Michigan.
Yeah, all right. Now, Washington at 15. Haskins, a lot of people think that's who they want, that he's the guy for them. They signed Case Keenum in the offseason, but Washington, are they going to get their quarterback of the future at 15?
It sure sounds like that. That's definitely the way everything seems to be trending, and I just reached out to some people today now, and they said, yeah, absolutely, Washington wants Haskins. They're trying to move up maybe as early as number 3 overall to do it, and that would be extremely costly, but if you believe he's your quarterback, there's no price too large to pay. And especially if you're Washington, you're going to have to take a chance when you're picking in the middle of the first round. And that's basically the definition of quarterback purgatory now with the albatross of Alex Smith's contract on their books. So if anybody needs a young, cheap quarterback, it's Washington. So I would applaud them for being bold and going after the guy if they have that conviction in Haskins.
I want to jump down to the Giants at 17. This is where you think they'll finally get the quarterback. Daniel Jones, Duke. Now, Duke doesn't, scream football school or quarterback factory, but is this where the Giants find the heir apparent to Eli Manning?
I think he's the guy they want. It's just a matter of does another team outmaneuver and grab them. And some people have made the case, and I would agree with it, is if you feel like he's a first-round quarterback in the future, why are you playing around and wait until 17? Just take him at 6. And I understand arguments on both sides, and I'm not as high on Jones as a lot of people are, but the league loves him. He's been extremely highly thought of around the league for many, many months for so many reasons. He's got the prototypical size. He's polished. He's technically sound. He's got a great pedigree. So he's going to go in the top half of round 1, and now it's just the question is, does he make it to the Giants there at 17? And one of the more controversial prospects, if something really crazy is going to happen tonight, I could see him going like the top 5 or 6 or something, and everybody's mind's blown because amongst the fans and the draftnik community, Daniel Jones isn't viewed as a first-rounder for a lot of them, let alone an early first-rounder.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to see if the Giants go that direction. After everybody kind of criticized him last year, they had a chance at 6. They wait to that spot. Will he be a guy that ends up working out for them? Scott Wright, DraftCountdown.com, as we dive into his mock draft here. Lindstrom, a guard from Boston College, Minnesota. Dexter Lawrence, Tennessee. And Rock Ya-Sin from Temple. Interesting because the Eagles, a lot of people think corner or safety, has been mentioned for them, which is interesting because they have a lot of guys there. But you look at Pittsburgh, and you like Rock Ya-Sin from Temple as a guy that can go to Pittsburgh and help them out because they've lost a lot of offensive firepower.
They have, but they've got some in-house replacements. Not only does Pittsburgh, for example, Antonio Brown, they lose, but they've got Juju Smith-Schuster. They used a second-round pick last year in James Washington. So they've got some playmakers still on offense. This is one of those picks that all along, I think every mock draft, every step of the way almost, has had a cornerback there. It's just a matter of which one. And kind of late in the process here, it emerged that the guy they liked is Rock Ya-Sin from Temple, which is just an amazing story. A year ago at this time, he was at Presbyterian at FCS school. He transferred up to Temple and not only proved he belonged, but he thrived and just killed the pre-draft process, especially at the Senior Bowl. And now I think he's going to be the first cornerback off the board in this draft. But this cornerback class is very much a case of beauty in the eye of the beholder. There's not a consensus. I think if you talk to 10 teams, you're going to get 10 different sets of top 10. So it just depends who you like there. But the run is going to start right there at Pittsburgh at 20, and then late round 1, early to mid round 2, I think we're going to see probably a half a dozen corners come off the board.
Marquise Brown, 22. We know the Eagles intrigued by him at 25, but if they want to get him, they're going to have to move up.
Maybe, and I just think that's such a great fit for the Ravens. For a team that's never going to have a prolific passing attack, they're going to face a lot of stacked boxes. They need a big play threat that can take advantage when those defenses are creeping up and hurt a team vertically. And Marquise Brown can absolutely do that for Lamar Jackson. But a case can be made too. Eric DeCosta in his first draft replacing Dazzie Newsome. Maybe he wants to go safe with an offensive lineman. Garrett Bradbury from North Carolina State would make a lot of sense. So I think those are the two options there, but But as much as I'd be leery of taking a wide receiver, and specifically Marquise Brown in round 1 for the Ravens in this specific situation, I think he'd be a good fit.
All right, Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com. Let's get down to Philadelphia at 25. And it's interesting, our Eagles guy, John McMullen, was on an hour ago, and he has the exact same guy you do, Jeffrey Simmons. Now, he's interesting because Jeffrey Simmons most likely will not play this year, correct? But the Eagles are a team that I'm sure when you're putting your mock draft and getting your information are really hard to figure out because they kind of don't need a guy to play right away at almost any position on the field, so they could be one of the teams that can afford to make this pick.
Yeah, and I think you have to kind of look at the DNA, and just a couple years ago, they took a chance on Sidney Jones, who had a major knee injury during the pre-draft process. They took him in the second round, and Philly, they need to restock that defensive line. That was one of their staples, and now they've taken some hits there in recent years. And Jeffrey Simmons, I'm not even sure he gets to 25, and in large part why he's going to go so early still, despite the concerns, is because he's ahead of pace on his rehab. From what I'm hearing, he might be ready after week 6. He might just have to go on the PUP list for the first 6 weeks, and then you get him back for the second half of the season. Boy, I mean, because when healthy, he's one of the 5 best players in this draft. In my final rankings, I kept him at number 5 overall. It's a similar situation when Jalen Smith was coming out of college. If you feel he's going to get back to health, you keep him high. So I think Jeffrey Simmons could go as early as 14 overall, and I don't think he's going to escape the first round.
Yeah, that's do you recommend that if you're the Eagles like 25 in that spot saying, you know what, if there's not a guy that can get on the field for you right away, this pick, I mean, it's almost like Dallas did a couple of years ago with the linebacker.
Well, a lot of people are talking about how you're going to get the same player at 50 as you would at 15 and right on down the line. If that's the case, why not swing for the fences if you have the job security and the luxury of doing it on a guy that would be in that upper echelon tier? He'd be up there with Nick Bosa and Quinnen Williams if he didn't have the injury and off-the-field issue.
All right, Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com. That's a look at his mock draft here. By the way, Drew Lock, Oakland 27. You think that's where they could go? Cody Ford's interesting, too. We think here locally that the Eagles could go that direction with that pick at 25 if he's on the board.
Yeah, and Cody Ford, he could go earlier than that, but I think what's going to hurt him is he's more of a right tackle or even a guard. And I think some of the teams, like, for example, Houston, they're looking for a left tackle. He's not a fit for them, I don't think. So maybe that pushes him down just a little bit just because of some of the team needs and the schematic fits.
All right, Scott Wright, tomorrow we'll be back to break down what happened tonight in the draft. We'll have it pick for pick, and we'll see what Philly does tonight. Hey, there's a good chance they don't make a pick tonight, and they might have extra ammunition for tomorrow. We'll talk about it here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Scott, we look forward to tonight. Thank you, man.
Thanks for having me.